Thank you for tuning in to the Crody Files.
I'm Craig Bryson.
And I'm Jodie Mears.
And together we are the Crody Files.
Hello, everyone. Today we are super excited for our next guest on the bonus episode of the Crody Files. Today we're joined by Maggie Olson, a pioneer, I should say, in executive leadership and the founder and CEO of Nova Chief of Staff. With 2 decades of experience, including serving as a chief of staff to a president at a Fortune 40 company, Maggie has transformed organization and is now revolutionizing the chief of staff role through her certification course, recruiting and consulting services. Maggie, we are so excited to tap into your expertise and your insights, especially as we address a listener question, which is the format of our bonus episode. So for those of you who haven't tuned in before to our bonus episode, it's focusing on just one listener question. And we discuss that listener question between the 3 of us. And we always invite a third opinion in the form of a guest contributor. And in this case, it's the amazing Maggie Olson. Maggie, welcome. We're really excited.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. What a kind intro. I'm really excited to be here. This will be fun.
Yeah. So
Great.
this is a big question. It's a hot topic of conversation. It's, some would say it's a trend. Some would say that it's a natural evolution of how EAs are aspiring to move their careers onwards and upwards. How would you describe the chief of staff phenomenon at the moment before I jump into the listener question, Maggie? Because it still fascinates Craig and I, and we're still sitting on the fence. But one thing's for sure is our ethos is sharing knowledge, network, learn, grow, and we never stop learning. So the fact that you do have this certification, it's all about learning. Learning is never a bad thing, but enlighten us a little bit more of how you ended up here, if you like.
Yeah, I think that the trend, if you will, is here to stay. My observation and in lots and lots of conversations and just seeing what's happening in the market is that CEOs and business leaders are telling their friends about the power of a chief of staff. And leaders have long known that tactical administrative support is crucial to their success. And they are realizing now, we're in this moment over the last several years and definitely growing and growing, that this high-level strategic execution and focused support is also necessary, a second role that is truly existing to support that business leader. The executive assistant role and the chief of staff role I can't think of any other roles that only exist to support a human in this like back office C-suite environment. So I think that's why we're here today in the world of the chief of staff growth. I think that's what's happening. And a little bit about me, I started Nova Chief of Staff. I launched my company about 2 years ago, 18 months ago. We launched our Chief of Staff certification course. I had just finished a corporate chief of staff role, and I had the privilege of building out a team of 7 or 8 people working with me and designing each role, system, process, really everything that we needed to survive and thrive as a back office team for this B2B leader of 5,000 people and $14 billion. And I was learning as I was going and really felt this amazing career alignment in the chief of staff space. And I left to do fractional chief of staff consulting. And I was having a conversation with my mom about how crazy it is that there's 20,000 project management certifications out there and literally nothing for chiefs of staff to find and really hone like hands-on practice, build those skills of the daily functions of chief of staff work. So she said, why don't you build it? So a year later, I was pregnant and building a course. And then here we are I have a 1.5-year-old course. So that's, we're here.
Twin. Gave birth to twin. That's amazing. I mean, kudos to you, because it's no mean feat starting anything when you're going through pregnancy, birth, and everything that comes around that. yeah, my hat goes off to you for that. Being a mum myself,
Yeah.
done the whole pregnancy, maternity leave 3 times, and I just know
Yeah. I
that.
haven't done it yet.
Oh, you
Not
might.
yet.
Yes, there's still time for you, Craig. Don't worry. But that is,
One of these
yeah,
days.
that needs to be homed in on. Just doing it during that time, amazing. So yeah, just a massive wow from both of us. So yeah,
Yeah.
Thank
thanks
you.
for following Mum's advice. Yeah, Mum's
Yeah, I
great.
know. Thanks, Mom.
She gave you the idea, but then you needed to run with it, right?
You've got to
Growing.
have that execution, and my chief of staff skills, it came in handy.
Boom. There you go. Let's get into this question then. As we operate a high Crody initiative. So when we first started the podcast, we wanted it to be very interactive, I think, for want of a better word,
Yeah.
with our audience, which are our peers, colleagues, friends globally. We want them to send in their bugbears, their burning questions, as complex or as basic as they may be, so we can give some of our opinions, insights, knowledge, blah, blah, blah. So this came in quite a while ago, and we've since had loads more. We've got thousands banked up. There's many that have been categorized into this chief of staff question. But this one, I guess, brings in a lot of those other questions into one. So here it goes. Hi, Crody. How can I, as an aspiring chief of staff, demonstrate and prove I am ready for the role? As a successful EA of 12 years, how can I be noticed and even considered? I would love to gain your perspective on this. Maggie.
Amazing question.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I love that question. And it's not a unique question. That's probably one of the most common questions that senior executive assistants who are interested in what's next, who are aspiring to something after their executive assistant role have that I hear for sure. So it's a good question.
So what can they demonstrate, and how do you prove you're ready for that role? And I guess this listener really wants to know is, how do you get noticed or even considered? Is it a case of, hi, I'm here, look at me, or do you go straight in, bull in a china shop and apply? How are you going to get noticed, and how do you know that you're ready for this role?
Yeah, I think that there are so many avenues that we can take these answers to, that we can dissect and dive into. What I would, if we want to start first on just like the basics, if it's chief of staff that you're looking for, with any role, it's always easier to move into a different role in your current environment. So my suggestion is always to focus on your current environment, whether it's your current leader or maybe a different leader. That would be step one. You can't always do that. Some folks are like, I've got to get out. So I get that. I get it. You might need to find a new environment, which is a lot more work. And it is getting back to the job search and the intense networking and all of those things. But if we were to isolate and talk about your current environment, maybe we can dive in there. What do you guys think?
Yeah. How do you know you're ready, Craig?
Well, yeah. And also, I just want to have this. There's a famous writer that wrote the Little Prince, and he quotes, "A goal without a plan is just a wish." So what was your plan to go, okay, you spoke to your mom and now you had to become a chief of staff. So how did you plan those steps? Because we know where we are, we know where we want to get, but we don't know what's happening in between. Could you elaborate more on that?
The answer to that is always, you just have to start. And everybody's starting is going to look different. For me, I'm a planner by nature. Surprise, chief of staff here. But for me, it's like I needed to plan my offer. I needed to have my website set up. I needed to have 50 different networking chats with folks who would potentially be hiring me or enrolling in our course. Like the work that I was going to do, I needed to pre-validate and have those conversations. Other people, it's not going to look like that. It's just going to look like picking up their phone and pitching some work and then doing the work and building the website later. But either way, you just have to start in the way that makes the most sense to you. And I guess, Jody, to your question of how do you know if you're ready, I like to describe folks, and if we're speaking specifically here about senior executive assistants who are looking into chief of staff roles. The folks who are going to make great chiefs of staff are driven, curious, achievement focused, collaborative. They love breadth versus depth. They love supporting a senior leader. They're okay behind the scenes, excellent problem solvers. You're probably going, yeah, that's me, or yeah, I know that girl. She's my friend, or whatever it is. You know those people. Driven achiever, learns fast, moves fast, great at execution, and wants to learn. The coolest thing about the chief of staff role, and I think any role, if you approach it this way, is just how much you can learn. Like, you are side by side with the leader of a company or the leader of some form of an organization, if it's not the CEO, intimately understanding how they make decisions and what they prioritize and how deep they go into the knowledge they need to know. I mean, all of these really interesting, critical things that you're witness to, like right there with a front row seat. So if that sounds interesting to you, obviously there's other factors. Like, you probably need to be excelling at your EA role. Like, you probably need to be receiving strong feedback. And if those things are true, and I think you need to also have this curiosity and reach for more. So if you're naturally like, oh, can I like dive into that project? I don't exactly know if I'm gonna like fully understand it, but I want to learn. I want to do it. Can I own this? If that's who you are and how you're approaching your work, I think it's important and relevant to explore the chief of staff role.
So it's something. So I find what you're saying is the more experience you have in different people, different cultures, different sectors, the more you have that want to grasp that next strategic project. So if you just left school trying to go to chief of staff, it's going to be more complex because you need to be able to be in the job to be able to understand what it's all about. Is that?
In a sense, I do think that I would say that I do believe that the chief of staff role could be excellent for a student who also fits that criteria. I don't think you have to have that deep experience in a certain place. I think that certain experiences is important, and understanding what you're strong at is really important, and how you can add value is really important. But chiefs of staff do that in a lot of different ways. And that's the beauty of the breadth of the role. I'm a strong project manager, so I lean into those filling of those gaps when we need a project managed that way for an executive team if I'm the chief of staff in that role. Whereas somebody else might be really strong in the event space or the communication space, or maybe they are just like lovers of that strategy component and they're deep into future strategy planning. You can lean into your strengths. So if you're younger or like less experienced, fresh out of school, I think it's more about what do you want to learn? What can you offer? And how do you show that? And how are you organized, for example? We're all probably organized in our own ways. Maybe you're the one planning the trips with the Google Sheet for your friends and you're planning it all out. That's one way. Another way is like, yeah, perfect. And another is all your notes are color coordinated and you've got different notes for everything. That might be a different person. It might still be you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think from pick up on a couple of things you said there. I disagree slightly with being okay with being behind the scenes, because if this person wants to know how do they know they're ready for the role, having that age-old connotation to the EA role of the backbone of the company, behind the scenes, behind the curtains, you're heard maybe, but you're not seen. I think going into that next level aspiration of chief of staff specifically, I think you've got to get to grips with coming out from behind the scenes internally. So being okay with saying, I've spotted an inefficiency. Here's my plan. I want to run with it. I think that kind of shows how your strategic and business acumen is coming into play. And if you're constantly doing all of these traditional EA admin types of reactive tasks flawlessly, but still lacking with that personal development where you're not coming forward and you're not speaking up in meetings, you're
Mm.
not raising concerns, you're not voicing inefficiencies in the workplace with processes or procedures, I think even though the chief of staff is level reporting into this traditionally, reporting into the CEO, you've still got to have that level of confidence and vibrancy and brilliance, if you like, of voicing what you feel needs addressing, solving, and doing, basically. So coming
Well,
out from behind
basically
the
like
scenes,
personal branding, for
yeah,
example.
that's
That's what you
highly
were talking
important.
about.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then the other thing I was thinking about is we often forget that feeder roles to the chief of staff role come from everywhere. It's not just the EA.
Mm.
That's not a linear straight line into the chief of staff suite, if you like. So with those school leavers, I think it's great if someone can have that aspiration at school leaver age to say, I've heard
Yeah.
so much about this chief of staff role over the last few years. I want to do that. I'm interested, but I don't want to be an eight. I think there's still space to explore that conversation where there's many other avenues and feeder roles that will come into this space. But one thing for sure, it's definitely having that quick, fast grasp of business, speaking the language of the business,
The language.
time and money saved and efficiencies versus inefficiencies. So I think for this question, how do you prove you're ready for the role? I think if you can speak up and demonstrate value, and like you said,
Mm.
even coming back to your personal branding part there, Craig, stepping out of those shadows, backbones behind the scenes and showing up for yourself, working on your personal brand internally and externally, and being able to articulate your value proposition will really help you understand if you're ready for the role. I think those practice types of questions, to practice those things in your senior EA role well and get great feedback and everything else will really help you understand. And I guess not all chief of staff roles belong in the corporate setting, do they? You have startup chief of staff, you have small tech firms chief of staff, where it might be a workforce of 25 as opposed to 2,500. So how do you see the diversity in the chief of staff role panning out? What are your observations from that? And how can this listener, if we keep reverting it back to the question, how can they be noticed and considered for those roles?
Yeah. So let's dive into that for sure. And I want to echo what you said. A chief of staff absolutely needs to be speaking out for themselves, need to have opinions on projects, need to be raising their hand, representing themselves well, speaking up. When I say behind the scenes, what I mean is they are not the person on the stage in front of their company. They are the person behind the curtain, putting the talk tracks together, making sure the agenda's been handed to the leader, that the leader's approved everything, that all the other executives are ready to go in tandem with the EA. EAs are also very involved in events and all those things, right? So it's the comfort of being number two, the comfort of having everything run really well, just like an EA, and not necessarily getting the shout out for it because when you know things are going well. A lot of chiefs of staff really like the role because they're not out in public in front and center. However, you're absolutely a contributing, respected, like influential leader with your peers in the back office, everybody that you're working with. So I think it's good that you brought that up for sure. And then when we come back to, you touched on a few things that I want to talk about. When we come back to the diversity of chief of staff roles, let's talk about that. And let's talk about how folks can prove that they're ready. I want to definitely make sure that we hit on how do you do it? What are the tactics? I have several we can share. But one thing that I like to talk about is that it's important to try to recognize the other, quote, chief of staff roles that exist under different titles, potentially in your same company. So let's say you are in a big corporate environment with thousands of people. There's likely chief of staff folks out there outside of the C-suite at other levels of the company reporting to, let's say, a director or a VP, and they may be under a different title. It could be, I have our most popular blog is The Many Titles of a Chief of Staff on
Yes,
Nova's.
I read it. That was on LinkedIn. I really liked that. Those were great.
There's
The
just so
same-
many.
The same
There-
for administrative assistants, like the Global Skills Matrix. When they
Yeah.
did their research, there was over 170 different job titles that described us. So yeah, it's great to know
Crazy.
that chief of staff doesn't get away lightly with it either.
And it's such a hard title to understand, and it doesn't have core functions like the EA role does. So it's definitely a little bit mysterious, but potentially business planning, business operations, like planning manager, those types of roles exist at different levels of your company. And so what's valuable is really realizing and being able to spot where those roles are in your company. And the ways you can do that are a few things. So if you're at let's say an all hands meeting for somebody lower down in your company, like a VP or a director, who's the person behind the scenes moving through the slides? Who put the slide deck together? Who's preparing the leader? Who's doing the, let's quote, doing of the meeting logistics? That's not necessarily the EA. If you're the EA, who are you actually getting the deliverable from when your leader is supposed to send, when the other leader, like the director, is supposed to send your leader, let's say the CEO, the thing you guys asked for? Who's the one sending that? Likely, if it's not the leader or the EA, likely that's the chief of staff type role. It's the person that exists to support the leader in a strategic executionary way. It's helpful to recognize this because EA to chief of staff may not be on the table if you're in the C-suite environment and they only hire ex-consultants or MBA, whatever it might be, like deep chief of staff experience. But it absolutely could be a really great path for you to go do a chief of staff role. Maybe it's under the same title or a different title for a leader that's like just slightly lower in the company, like director or VP. Those are great starter chief of staff roles.
Yeah.
And then to your point, Jody, the chief of staff role exists everywhere, every industry. You can walk into entertainment, media, food and beverage, nonprofit, for-profit, big business, small business, higher ed, like high net worth. I could just keep going on. And there are chiefs of staff in every single industry, and the core purpose of the role is the same everywhere. The day-to-day may look different, but on the flip side, you could walk into any of these industries and they'll have never heard, like one of these companies, and they may have never heard of the chief of staff role. There's still an awareness and education component.
It's so ambiguous still, which I guess is what makes it difficult to pick. But yeah, you're absolutely right. If it's a fascination with a C-suite title that you've got, I think it's good to unpick that and understand why, because there are many other titles, like you said. And if you're not recognizing what that might look like, A, in your current organization, or B, in your desired sector, it might be a good idea to understand what the other titles, like for EAs, or for admin staff, there's 170 different ones, but there might be a good idea to start understanding if it is just the chief of staff you're looking for, or that wholesome role of the chief of staff, and be okay with it being titled something different. So I'm seeing in organization director of the executive office. That's chief of staff when you drill down into the job description. So I think for this listener is aspiring. They want to know how can they, as an aspiring chief of staff, but also as an aspiring career growth as well in general.
Sure.
So how do you address that with particularly your courses, consulting and recruiting? How are you advising of the many different nuances and different titles that could be out there? And how does that align or help in any way when administrative professionals are trying to get away from the word assistant? How does
Totally.
that cross over with what you offer?
Just to stop on the chief of staff title a bit, it's often like completely out of our control what the title is. There are C-suites in major companies that just don't use the chief of staff term for the chief of staff role. So they may not use it, they may not like it, they just may not have adopted it. It may just be held for one person, and that's truly just the chief of staff CEO, and they don't want to use it for everybody else. But all of that is out of our control. What's in our control is the job we're doing, what we're aspiring to do, trying to spot the job that we're looking for, and just starting to learn deeply about what that could look like. I would be remiss if I did not mention that our course, Nova's Chief of Staff Certification course, is a great place for folks to learn how to really obtain hands-on practice doing things chiefs of staff do every day, figure out if it's right for you. You can check out our syllabus to learn more. But let's focus on what you can do in your job now. I believe that we talked about the characteristics. We talked about what you're leaning into, if you're filling in some projects, what you're doing. If you feel like you're ready for chief of staff, I would also suggest that you're doing a few other things. One of those things is having consistent one-on-ones with every single person on your leadership team. So not just your leader, but all of the people that report to them and any other key individuals that are in the sphere of your leader's back office. This will do a few things. It will build trust for folks with you around just closeness and relationship, and that you're asking the right questions. You want to identify what their priorities are. You want to help them see you as a trusted person in the business from like a business partner perspective. And what will happen over time, it's not going to happen immediately, but over a few months of having these conversations, maybe 3 to 6 months, you're going to start connecting the dots between what this person's talking about over in marketing to this person over in product to what your leader is needing and asking for to what's getting done, what's not getting done. And you're going to have some answers. You will be one of very few people having consistent conversations with everybody on the team, and you will start to have this lens of the business that's unique, and you can start adding value. And that's where Jody mentioned you've got to be speaking up. So that's a part of it.
Yeah,
but,
go ahead.
but also you're the ears and the eyes of the company. So you need to know the company inside out. You need to know, okay, these are the procedures, these are the policies that are in place. And that's another added sort of bonus to you as a chief of staff. But I noticed there's difference between the United States and the UK. So with the UK, you tend to have a chief of staff who's also the EA to the CEO. What are your thoughts on that?
Never do it. Don't do it. Bad idea. Absolutely not. Two separate roles. And it's not just the UK that gets this wrong. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's, it's folks trying to save money. It's folks maybe not understanding the role. I think the chief of staff role is misunderstood, and we're here to keep talking about it and keep clearing it up.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the executive assistant role holds core admin functions, and they almost all do: inbox, scheduling, travel, expense, logistics. And many will step in and lead a strategic project or solve an important problem. And that's great. People are often stepping into more responsibility in their roles. A chief of staff very rarely ever is going to hold those core functions of admin work. And when they're combined, everybody knows you can't do two roles well.
No.
You can't have the strategic impact of a chief of staff. Like, the beauty of the chief of staff role is being able to see the business from that 10,000-foot view, solving problems in many areas, not owning and adopting major work streams that will then bog you down for the rest of your role. It's having touch points, finding solutions, implementing systems, making sure they're launched, good to go, ready. And then you're moving on to what's next. You're checking back in and you're making the business run better. And you're doing that over and over in different areas of the business. How are you going to do that when you're managing an executive schedule, travel, calendar?
I guess once you understand the core functionalities and you've really done a proper deep dive and even a SWOT analysis on yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities and threats within your current role, limitations, etc. I think you can then truly understand if within your current organization, they are asking you to double up, triple up on the role, if you like. So same with administrative assistants, you might get a executive assistant and office manager, but that might be suitable for that size of company. But I think once you get your teeth into understanding what that COS role truly is, you can then decide, I want the true autonomy and the separation from the COS. And therefore, I now recognize that I might have to look for that outside of my current organization. So it can be a good highlighter in a way if you are being asked to double up and triple up on your role, because if you are an EA, a PA, a VA, an office manager, and chief of staff, you've got to realize that probably isn't going to be a true chief of staff anywhere else. So are they setting you up for failure when you decide to leave and say, I'm going to start applying for chief of staff roles elsewhere, knowing that your experience with that fragmented role has not really stood you in good stead for that organization. So, for example, there was an organization who, with salary banding and job title clumping, as I call it, they clump everyone together to make sure everyone fits in a salary band. Even the receptionists are clumped together in senior administrative assistants, which doesn't help that kind of person in a reception role with that job title on their CV or resume to say, I'm a senior administrative assistant, but my experience, knowledge, and skills did not reflect that reception. So I guess with this question as well, because we're really picking into it, and it'd be good to get a closing summary as to what this person needs to do. Proving you're ready for the role also comes with recognizing what your current organization has given you experience-wise with title clumping. So how would you differentiate that in an answer, Maggie, to help this listener really home in on what it is they need to do to prove to themselves and to their organization they're ready for this role, and then to just touch on being noticed and being considered?
Yeah. There's several other tactics that we can talk about here. And one of the first things, and you touched on this a little bit with kind of a SWOT analysis, is to reflect. So we're all moving a million miles a minute. There's a lot going on, especially in an executive back office. But what's really important is that we slow down for 20 minutes and we just do nothing and we think and we reflect on this potential transition, on how you can add more value, how you can prove that you're ready for the next thing. What I want you to think about is, what are you hearing consistently from your leader? What are the repeated things that they talk about? What do they complain about? What are the major issues in process or system that exist on your team? Which leaders on your team are really getting things done and which ones aren't? And again, just come back to your leader and what they're constantly talking about and sit with that, document it, write it down. And from that point, what I suggest is that you narrow in on a few priorities, what you think you're best suited to solve. If you have the bandwidth, like I don't recommend doing both roles. Like, you're not compensated for it. You're not going to get recognized for it. You're going to burn out. But what do you have the bandwidth for? And what are you best suited to solve? And on top of that, what's really one of the bigger priorities where you can make an impact by taking on a small project or a big problem to help the team with. Additionally, what I always suggest, because it's going to be easier to move from EA to chief of staff in your current environment, is having those conversations with your leader. And what I recommend that you do is really inventory the buckets of things that you do every day. Maybe you have two columns, and one is this administrative world, and one might be a little bit more of the strategic gap filling special projects. As you grow in your role, it's very common to start taking on more of those gap filling special projects, like a few strategic things here and there, right? Of course, because you're adding value and you're seen as really impacting the business. The best way that I recommend having these conversations is documenting the lists of the things that you're doing, admin bucket, maybe more strategic buckets, chief of staff bucket, and going to your leader and having a conversation, something like, here's where I am spending my time. All of these things are really important. If you agree, I believe that this area over here, these problem solving, filling the gaps, strategic projects, is probably more worth your time that I'm spending on. And if you agree, I'd love to focus more time there and offload some of these other responsibilities. You can go so far as suggesting a timeline for hiring a backfill. And maybe it's a junior person to take on the core admin functions of your role so that you can spend your time doing those more strategic activities. But it's important to pitch yourself, coming back to representing yourself and speaking up.
Mm.
Pitch yourself, talk about what you want, share a timeline. There's ways to do this, and it's important to gauge the formality of your environment and your relationship with your leader. Is it just a quick conversation? Is it an email? Are you printing off something and you're sitting there a little more formally delivering? That's up to you. Drip it a bit. Drip the idea of, I'm curious about stepping into a more strategic role and I'm exploring it. And if Nova's course is able to help you, I'm interested in leveling up through this course. And then maybe we can touch base afterwards and talk about a transition. Like, there's ways to do it, but you've got to have the conversation. It's always going to be easier to move in your current environment.
It's always going to come
Can I-
down to effective communication, strategic communication, confident and effective communication. I would say don't be afraid to have those honest conversations, firstly with yourself. What do you want?
Mm.
Why do you want it? And then learning how to rehearse, if you like, your elevator pitch or your unique value proposition. To voice that confidently is going to be how you're going to get noticed, by speaking up and doing all of those soft or essential skills that often get left unnurtured, if you like, for where
And I
people
think
are racing
actions
ahead
as well.
professional.
Your actions as well. Your actions as well is very important because people in your industry are watching you all the time, and even your peers in the EAs are watching you. And if you're like, you step up to the plate and you go, okay, I want to sit on your board meeting and I'm going to take notes. We could do it better if we did this and we do it and have that voice. But I know some EAs don't have that confidence, and I'm just going to take the notes. I'm just going to take the notes and just do what I've been told. And I think it's about time they step to the plate and step to the
If they
table.
want that, yeah. And I think if you know
Yeah.
you want that progression into the chief of staff or any other directorship, you would have already have been doing that quite well.
Yeah.
I think so. But ultimately, the confidence to pitch yourself, for sure, Maggie, I really agree with that, is moving into self-advocacy. You can't
And,
be
you know, and
noticed if you don't speak.
Yeah. And I was just thinking as well, if you've been doing the work for the last 6 months or 9 months or a year of having one-on-ones with everybody on your executive team, you're likely going to have some supporters at this point too, who can back you up when the leader goes and says, Maggie just talked to me about moving into a chief of staff role. What do you think? Oh, we've been talking about my business for 6 months. She has a lot of really great insights and she's actually taken on a few projects for me. And I think you should think about it. Those are conversations that will naturally happen over time, building trust, showing your value, but you've got to be putting the work in consistently, which it's not easy. We all know it's not easy to pick up another one-on-one, let alone 6.
Easier said than done.
Yeah.
My goodness. I
Yeah,
could go
yeah.
on for hours. I don't know about you. I have so many more
Yeah.
layered questions around that, but let's wrap this up. It's been such an insightful conversation, and I'm still on the fence with a lot of things because of the complexities of everything surrounding it. So it just brings me back to the thoughts of the administrative profession in general. But what's your closing comments for our listener who is aspiring to the chief of staff role? What should they focus on primarily now and in the future? What should they consider? Let's give our final thoughts.
Final thoughts here would be build skills, network, consider deeply what you're looking for, have those conversations, take on small projects to build your confidence. Often confidence is the leading factor. So even if you feel ready for a chief of staff role, it's still okay not to feel confident, but you've got to overcome that in a sense. Just put yourself in the positions to have the conversations and to eventually move into the role. Check us out, novachiefofstaff.com. We've got a certification course. I think we're nearing 600 students across 22 countries.
Wow.
Incredible reviews. People are leaving with the confidence and validation that they can do the job and the resources to hit the ground running. We just published a few case studies that just make me emotional. One of our students, Nicola Bradley, actually from the UK, she was just really lacking self-belief, and it was just hindering her, like weighing on her so heavily. And she was so excited from the coursework, like, I can do this. I'm doing a lot of it already. Oh my
that's
gosh,
great.
I know how to position
That's great.
myself. Yeah. And then she ended up getting a chief of staff role for what she calls her dream company. It's neat.
amazing.
So,
That is the
yeah, it's
ultimate.
really
Yeah,
cool.
that's
So
a great
check us
case
out. We're
study.
happy to help.
And I noticed on your resource library on the Chief of AI policy writing support, that is great.
Free resource library, novachiefofstaff.com. We've got tons of resources in there. Yeah, you can, one project you want to take on, companies need AI policies written.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm
Spearhead it.
definitely going to be
Start
doing
the
that.
conversation.
that's how you can move
Love it.
ultimately into a
Yeah,
strategic
yeah.
E8 first to know that you're ready for the bigger role that will separate you. And I
Mm,
guess my closing thoughts, are you ready to stop being an EA? Are you ready to let
mm,
go of those traditional duties and tasks that you up until now just love? Are you ready to separate yourself? Have those honest conversations with yourself. Be confident. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable and owning spotlights.
mm.
And yeah, I really want to hear back from this listener to see what happened next.
Yeah.
But thank
Well,
you so
I
much.
might say, I might closing, I comment, I think that earlier I said a goal without a plan is just a wish. I think get a plan in
Oh,
place and focus on that goal. Don't give up, but don't do a 5-year plan because it's too long. I think life's too short. Get those small goals in to achieve your bigger goal in the end.
make a
Yeah,
start.
I love that. I love that. And
Mm.
we'll go ahead and give Crody listeners $100 off our course too. If you enroll this
Oh,
year, you'll save a bunch of money because the price is going up next year. So CRODI 100, you'll get $100 off our enrollment.
that's
Perfect.
amazing. What an offer. I'll
Thank
put that
you.
in the show notes for anyone listening so you can look further into that. And it will be on our LinkedIn social media for you to follow up with as well. Maggie, thank you so much. Thank
Thank
you for
you.
all that you're doing for the profession and the elevation of careers. It's not going
Very
unnoticed.
inspirational.
It is.
Thank you. That means a lot. I'm happy to be here. And this was a really fun conversation. So thanks for having me.
All right, we'll wrap it up. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Come take my hand.